Good morning, everybody. First of all, let me welcome you to MEC's annual meeting. We're very excited that y'all are here. We're also very excited about the format we're doing today is a little different. In fact, we're doing 3 concurrent sessions in the first hour to give people kind of options of things to learn about it. I think all 3 are very informative, but this one in particular was something that was important to me. I had the opportunity back in September of last year of spending about a half a day at the FBI headquarters in Washington, and most of that time was spent talking about cybersecurity. So that's one of the reasons that we have our special agent for the Jackson district from the FBI on this panel to talk about how the FBI is there to assist businesses when they have issues, because this is an issue that's growing. It's an issue that is very prevalent in the business community, protecting data, protecting information, that we feel like we want to spend a little time discussing. We've got a wonderful panel today. It's going to be moderated by Janet Parker. Janet oversees all marketing and public relations with the Innovate Mississippi in her role as Director of Business Development and Marketing. She does a lot of it. She produces their events, their magazine, and so many other things. I've gotten to know Janet really well over the last few years and really have come to appreciate all the work that she and Innovate does, and I felt like it would be a great opportunity for us to really let them kind of lead this discussion in the technology arena as it relates to cybersecurity. In addition to her work there, she was in the marketing firm of Maris West and Baker prior to coming over there, and has been recognized as a top 10 business women's leader by the Mississippi Business Journal. So. Oh, sorry.
We can hear you.
I talk loud.
I could hear him.
I've been doing, but you know, when you're on the road all the time, it's big and I talk really loud. But anyway, I really do what, Jack? I'm sorry.
I said no difference.
No difference.
Yes, that's exactly the same.
So anyway, we're very excited. We appreciate this. I'm going to turn it over to Janet. She's going to actually introduce the panelists. First, she's going to just talk for just a minute about kind of what's going on at Innovate. And again, thank y'all for being here. We're looking forward to a wonderful day.
Can you hear me okay, or do I need to amplify? You hear okay? Well, hey, I want to thank you all for being here. Welcome to my panelists. Welcome all of you for this very important topic today on cybersecurity. Again, I'm Janet Parker with Innovate Mississippi, and for those of you who are not familiar with Innovate Mississippi, we work with early stage technology and innovation-based startups throughout the state. If you've ever talked to our CEO, Tony Jeff, you've heard him say we're kind of like the Shark Tank for the state of Mississippi, which is really an easy way to kind of better understand what we do. And we work in a coach and connect model, coaching entrepreneurs and startups and connecting them to resources that they need to grow their businesses. And a new program that we just launched, we're in the process of building this right now. We're real excited about is called Co-Builders. And this is the first ever statewide startup accelerator. We are collaborating with 7 partners all around the state, and they're helping us find these companies, you know, that we may not have ever known existed before. We're bringing together in a cohort that begins May 3rd. We've got 20 companies starting with us. But it really lends to the discussion today on cybersecurity and the importance of that. And a lot of people, you know, when you think of Mississippi, you're not thinking of it as a technology state. A lot of people, you know, you think of Mississippi as being a rural state, you think of agriculture, but you're not necessarily connecting that with technology. But the truth is that technology is part of everything that we do. It's part, you see my iPad here, we all have phones, watches, and we're in a connected society, and technology just keeps expanding and growing. I see Lavaki folks over here who's doing virtual reality creation, but we also have a company that has a technology solution to move dirt. So we call it dirt tech. So really, it's really everywhere, which makes us more and more vulnerable to the risks that are out there today. And that's why I think this conversation is so important. And you know, everybody in the room can relate to that. I'm sure we've all had fear of our data, our information being hacked, being stolen. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but the smarter that we think we are, you know, in protecting our data, it seems like the hackers become more and more sophisticated. And I, you know, just ask the question, what can we do to better protect ourselves? How can we stay on top of this game?
So here I have today an expert group of panelists in a variety of fields who are going to help answer some of those questions and give us some tips and ideas on how we can better protect ourselves. So I have to put my reading glasses on now to read their intros because I can't. They're so accomplished. I can't memorize them all, but I can't read it without my glasses either. So I'd like to introduce first at my far right, Jermica Fomby. Jermica recently moved to Jackson, and I'd like to welcome you officially to Jackson, Mississippi. He's been named the special agent in charge of the Jackson Field Office for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Jermica joined the FBI in 2003, and he's been a field investigator and served in leadership roles in Ohio, New York, Texas, Washington, D.C., Afghanistan, all over, and numerous other short-term assignments. Jermica attended Miles College as the first ever recipient of the Army 4-year scholarship, and upon graduation was commissioned as an active duty second lieutenant into the Adjunct General's Corps. He went on to serve 7.5 years of active duty, including basic combat training, the 10th Mountain Division, and as an Army officer, he was awarded the Air Assault Badge, the Airborne Parachutist Badge, I can barely say that, and the Meritorious Service Medal, among other commendations. Jermica earned a Master's of Organization Management from Tusculum University, as well as an Ed.S. from Seton Hall University. So welcome, Jermica. We also have Mike Skinner, who I'm pleased to introduce. Mike is the managing partner for Horn Cyber, based in Richland. And, well, you're based in Memphis. You're actually in Memphis. And in that role, he helps clients leverage technology innovations to help safeguard their business, their critical data, and their brand reputation. He's responsible for cybersecurity, information technology audit, regulatory compliance, and business solution implementation. Mike's been with the firm for more than 5 years, but outside of Horn, he's has 10 years of additional experience with organizations in a variety of sectors, including a national retail telecom firm and a Fortune 500 international transportation provider. Mike earned a bachelor, then a master of accountancy, both with an emphasis in information systems from the University of Mississippi. So welcome, Mike. And to my right, we have Dr. David Shaw. Dr. Shaw is the provost and executive vice president at Mississippi State University. And as their chief academic officer, he oversees all academic policies and operations for 8 academic colleges and 2 campuses, as well as many academic and non-academic support units in addition to that. Dr. Shaw joined Mississippi State faculty as an assistant professor in 1985 with a joint teaching and research appointment in the Department of Plant Pathology and Weed Science. Prior to being provost, and this is where we first met originally, he was vice president of research and economic development. And during his time in that role, Mississippi State attained the Carnegie Foundation R1 status for very high research activity, which is really a big deal. It's a small group of colleges that get that honor. And has consistently, during his time, Mississippi State ranked among the National Science Foundation's top 100 research institutions. In addition, in 2017, the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program selected him for its prestigious U.S. to France International Education Administrators Program. Dr. Shaw holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture from Cameron University in Oklahoma and a master's and a doctorate from Oklahoma State University, both in weed science. So welcome, Dr. Shaw. And we've got a lot to cover, so let's jump in, and I'm gonna start with some questions, but we're gonna keep this really conversational, and just panelists, if you want to ask each other a question, that's fine. I just want to keep it free-flowing and conversational. So Mike, let's start with you though, in your role at Horn Cyber as a managing partner. Tell us a little bit more about what you do, and why do companies need to be concerned about their information security?
Sure. So at Horn Cyber, sorry, that was loud. At Horn Cyber, what we do is we take a holistic approach to helping organizations strengthen their cybersecurity posture. And one thing we realize is that cybersecurity really has two parts. It has a technical aspect and a human aspect. And the humans are always going to be our weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity. So we offer services and help clients with things like policies and procedures, kind of that base information that the users need to have to know what they should and shouldn't do with their information systems. We also do a lot of training of organizational users. And that's something that organizations do on a recurring basis, because no matter how many times you train a user about phishing emails, they're going to click those links when they come in. You know, we're conditioned to click. We're in a fast-paced environment. We're going to click links when they come in. So we spend a lot of time training organizations. And then on the technical side, we do penetration testing, which is where we go in and assess the security posture of a network just like a real hacker would. Both the internal network environment and the external network environment, and web applications. We do a lot of web application testing. Obviously, like Jen had said, technology is evolving. Organizations are starting up every day with new web application technology, and a lot of those web applications have inherent vulnerabilities in them. So we're doing a lot of that, helping a lot of organizations in that area. And you know why information security is important? It's what runs our businesses. It's what runs our economy. It's what runs our country. And our adversaries, the bad guys, know that, and they want to impact us. U.S. organizations are heavily targeted, no matter if it's a small organization or a large enterprise. The bad guys that are out there want to not only steal our data, which has always been the historical objective, but now they want to impact our operations.
Well, so what are some ways, I mean, how do you detect these breaches? How do you become aware of them?
So there's a lot of ways that breaches are detected. You know, in the historical cybersecurity monitoring model, there were monitoring tools, and we still have those today, where we're looking for what are known as indicators of compromise. So this is unusual behavior that either a user is performing, or a suspected user, or a system is performing. So these monitoring systems get a baseline of what the environment should look like, and anything that looks different, that's when flags start going off. Now, with things like, or risks like ransomware, people are finding out about breaches because they can't access the data that they need to run their business. They can't access the systems that they need to generate the revenue to keep the business running on a daily basis. So that's really one of the main ways that people are identifying a breach right now. And unfortunately, another way is third parties are notifying organizations, whether it be a business partner, a vendor, a customer, that is notifying either their customer or their vendor that they got a suspicious email from their account, or some other suspicious activity has originated, or they're notified by law enforcement sometimes that they have been breached. So there's a lot of different ways that organizations are notified, or that a breach is identified, but unfortunately today you can't access the data you need to run your business.
Well, and thank you for that. Jermicah, tell us a little bit, as the special agent in charge of the Jackson Division, what role does the FBI play in cybersecurity? And also, what are some of the biggest threats that you're seeing today?
Okay. I think the things that Mike talked about, as well as Mr. Walker when he was here earlier in the introductions, the role the FBI plays, I think he used the verb when he was in FBI headquarters last year, was assist, play a partnership. A lot of times we're on the back end of things because, as Mike said, oftentimes companies are not aware of things ahead of time. We're not really doing what I would describe as pre-maintenance checks, reviews, things that we would identify indicators or pick up on indicators for what those things are, and we're behind the curve when it comes to training that companies like his provide. And so it's really key to have partnerships, very similar to what we're having here now, whether they're formal discussions, such as a panel, or just actual engagements of saying to partners or to friends or other associates, hey, this is what I saw. Have you experienced this before? Or look at what happened to us and find a ways to get those things out. And that's a challenge because the cyber threats evolve all the time. They're ever changing. I think more rapidly than the coronavirus changed. Right? As soon as you figure out what's going on one level, you have something else that's happening. And then no matter what, again, as Mike hit on earlier, you have the technology aspect of it, you have the human aspect of it, and humans make mistakes. And then humans with improper ideology or nefarious means or objectives will capitalize on those mistakes that humans make. And ultimately, that is all we have when it comes to cyber threats, right? Vulnerabilities being taken advantage of because they exist, and to do something with them. So when we look at cyber threats from a terminology standpoint, or definition standpoint, it is when someone does not have proper authority to access something and they execute that authority to do so, whether it is a private, regular criminal or a state backed actor or state actor officially to do something to identify that. And it's ultimately to disrupt what we do, whether it's your business to make money, whether it's our organization's, our nation's business to safeguard our infrastructure. And the vulnerabilities exist because Janet's opening was that everything we do, whether we realize it or not, depends upon technology, whether it's a phone or your way you bank and so forth. And so we're always on the defensive, and we can be on the defensive less if we communicate more, collaborate more, and coordinate more to be proactive in dealing with those matters.
Well, one thing you kind of mentioned, the mindset of the hacker. I do want to get back to that later in the conversation because I want to find out more about what's going on in their mind. But what's one of the biggest threats today? What's changed over the last few years, even since COVID?
Well, since COVID, we have become much more mobile, much more remote, therefore even more dependent upon technology to conduct our businesses. And we're doing those things with a lot of comfort, which is that we're using Zoom and MS Teams, and again, there's security aspects to those, but human built, so they're vulnerabilities. We also become complacent because we become comfortable with those. So if you come to my business right now, and you have to come through a gate with a security guard and a badge and a PIN code, and then you get to another layer, and then you have to use a badge and another PIN code, and that's before you even get to the computer systems. If I'm working remotely at my house, it's just my code, which everybody in my family knows, and I log on to a site that probably other people can log to get my, my Wi-Fi, and then, as Mike described, I'm clicking before I think about what I'm clicking on, and so therefore we're more vulnerable to those things. And then we also live in a very social media driven world. We want everything to be out there. And even if you're not putting what you think is your private business out there, you have a profile or footprint, indicators that things about you that are there, and someone who is determined puts a little bit together on one side, a little bit together on the next side, send you something that you click on that fills in that empty space, and now therefore we are compromised. And so in the two forms of the most common things that I think are there now are the ransomware and business email compromises. So business email compromise is something that you all are subjected to because it will send you a phishing scam or something to identify that. A lot of times I may try to do something with the lowest ranking individual in your office who thinks something comes from your C-suite. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to give you what it is or authorize something. Also, and that is done a lot of times. The bad actor will mimic a very similar email that at quick glance looks like an official email, and they'll have a link to transfer. You want to make a payment, a vendor. Send that payment to me, and I actually intercept that, and it's long gone before you realize that you're out of hundreds, if not millions of dollars based upon those things. And then also ransomware, because I think Mike described this earlier too. Ransomware, just like any other criminal activity, just like ransom and kidnapping, we see these take over your system and now make you pay me to get it back. And then that is a challenge. And if your business is a big business, your business is active, you need your systems to access things, you're immobilized until you're able to do that. And I would always encourage you, because I can't direct you, I would encourage you to never pay a ransom. This is where we come in, whether it's a private industry partner that specializes in cybersecurity, or you're dealing with us from an investigative standpoint. We utilize our tools and assets to free you up to work that out. But once you pay the ransom, then there's nothing we can do. And you also are subjected to being hit again for more ransom, to another ransom. Those are the challenges and concerns.
Well, it's funny you say that. I get a weekly email from Tony Jeff asking me, telling me it's an emergency and that I need to go buy a Visa card for him for his kids. But anyway, we always joke about that. But it's not funny. It's a real threat. So and on that note, so we work with small businesses. We're a small business. There's larger businesses represented here. Are the threats different? Are they unique to small versus a large company?
So they are not, other than, I guess the best way I can describe it is robbing a small credit union versus robbing, the corporate, the Wells Fargo of the where all the money's stored, the larger banks. It's just a different crime. Same outcome, it's just the level of impact will be a little bit less on a smaller organization. But if you're a small organization, you can't afford to lose more, right? Those are challenges. I think the other part, though, a small company or big company, there's always a concern for a cyber threat. And that's what we don't really think about. So you only think about the folks who are outside of your perimeter, your company, whatever, your insider threats, the people that you may have not recognized that they're disgruntled or upset, or someone you're about to get rid of, or someone who has other indicators that make them exploitable. And those are as much of an issue, if not, because they have your playbook, they know the access, they know the names, and they have the real emails addresses to do things with. And so those are things that we need to talk more about to safeguard your business, your practices, and your customers.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Shaw, I'd like to move on to talk about a little bit about what Mississippi State is doing in terms of the cybersecurity field and how you're preparing students who are entering this field.
So I think there's several ways that we're approaching that, and I'll touch on them, and then we can, as the conversation goes on, kind of expand on each one of these. But we're thinking about cybersecurity really in at least three different ways. One is basically workforce preparation, and one is the research side, and one is really the ecosystem. And I think it's great to have a panel like this because we're the private sector, the federal agencies, state agencies, and academic institutions are all working together in Mississippi in some ways that I'm really proud of to see. I think I would say, I guess I would start from a workforce standpoint. And that is not just teaching undergraduate students that are majoring in cybersecurity, even though that's incredibly important. We have seen an overwhelming interest. We just created, of course, we've had a computer science degree program for a long period of time. Just in the last 10 years, we've seen more than doubling of the majors in computer science. And because of that, we actually last year created the first program in the state that was a major in cybersecurity. And so we recognize that that's something that the workforce needs and there's demand for. And so we certainly want to be creating majors that allow our graduates to be able to be at the leading edge of the technology and of the challenge. But that really needs to start a lot earlier than that. And so one of the things that I'm just really proud of our state is that we've invested as a state in this state funding that's university focused, that's also partnering with the private sector to go down to K-12 and to create some new programs. And so we have 65,000 students in the state of Mississippi at the K-12 level that have now been taking a class in cybersecurity. And so it's something that not all states can say. In fact, very few states can say that they have put the focus on that level of education that our state has done. And Mississippi State has really been proud through curriculum development, through teacher education, through all aspects of it, working through the State Department of Education to see that happen. And so that also then creates the pipeline that we all want to see, so that students, when they come to school, whether they're going to a community college, to be able to get a coding degree or to be able to get a 2-year degree in cybersecurity, or whether they're going to come on to a 4-year institution like Mississippi State, they're really well prepared and also understanding fully what it's going to take to be able to accomplish a degree in that program. You know, Mississippi State has long focused a major effort in cybersecurity, and so you know, we're one of only 10 institutions in the nation that have all 3 of the designations, academic designations from the National Security Agency. So cyber operations, cyber education, cyber research are all designations that we hold. And that's something that we really work to capitalize on, to tell the story of the great things that are happening here in the state of Mississippi. And so it's something that we can all be proud of. But I think the other aspect that kind of transitions over into that next point that I was making, that is the research side of things, because as both of my fellow panelists have talked about, this is something that what you're well versed in today has changed by tomorrow. And I'll give you a really good example. Back a few years ago, we had a great conversation with Keesler Air Force Base. And Keesler trains tens of thousands of airmen and women every year in fundamentals of cybersecurity. But they have instructors that are just absolutely overwhelmed. They are teaching 40 hours a week, and as we all know, the curriculum that you teach in cyber next semester needs to be different than it is this semester. But they did not have time, they did not have the workforce, they did not have the expertise to be able to update and revise their curriculum. So we partnered with them to provide the research expertise on what both is cutting edge and what they need to be thinking about even for the future. And that has been a wonderful partnership that has just really exploded. It's something that we're really proud of the way that that is working. And that touches on this ecosystem side of things, because I think that partnership, the partnership that we have with our partners here on the stage, but partnerships like with Keesler and like with our state agencies that are concerned with cybersecurity, has created a situation in which we actually have the Mississippi Cyber Initiative. We're honored to be able to lead that effort, but it really is all about partnership, and that's what all 3 of us have been talking about all along. Is this is not something that the FBI owns, this is not something that the private sector owns, this is not something that academia owns. It's an all hands on deck to be able to be sure that we're doing what's necessary to protect our businesses and our agencies and private individuals, but also creating an ecosystem here in the state of Mississippi so that we're really out on the leading edge of this technology as opposed to trading behind.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you touched on, you know, the preparation you're doing in the education in the K through 12, you know, as far as this being an opportunity for students to go into. I think that's so important. Tell me a little bit more about the job market and the demand. And, you know, we talk about brain drain all the time, and we're trying to keep our educated folks here. We're trying to keep our students in Mississippi. So what does the job market look like in terms of cybersecurity here?
Well, I want to treat your question in 2 ways, and I actually would love for Mike to chime in on this as well. You know, from our standpoint, that we're looking at 100% placement of every student that we graduate. And so from the job market, from the standpoint of employability, is phenomenal. What we're also finding is that here in the state of Mississippi, it is really hard to be able to fill all of the positions that are related to cybersecurity in the state. There's a lot of things that we as a state have to focus on. We've got to become more of a technology-driven state. You know, and perceptions of our graduates are that they would like to stay here, but if the best jobs are somewhere else, they're going to go where they can get the best job. And so we have to really work hard on creating those jobs, and that's why I think it's really important that we have companies like Horn that are located in the state of Mississippi, so that our best students have the opportunity to be able to stay at home instead of going somewhere else. So I think it's the workforce is being created, having 1,000 computer science graduate majors at this point in time is something that's phenomenal to be able to say. Having several hundred new cybersecurity majors that we're talking about in addition to that. So there's plenty of opportunity. We just need to create that ecosystem in which the jobs are here.
Right.
No, I think that's 100% correct. They're in a cybersecurity program through a School of Computer Science, like at Mississippi State University, there's going to be 100% placement for a while. We have trouble, like Dr. Shaw was saying, we have trouble matching sometimes the salary and pay of some of the larger organizations in larger metropolitan areas. So what we have to really focus on from a recruiting standpoint are the benefits of staying in Mississippi, the benefits of working in the economy in Mississippi, continuing to build Mississippi. That's really a big sales pitch for us in our recruiting process, but absolutely it will be a tough market for the private sector as well as the federal government and federal agencies. And the difficult part is we're kind of all competing for the same talent, and the students know that, and it's great to have a cybersecurity focused program, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. There was a time where we couldn't find qualified candidates, and the universities answered that, and now we're seeing that pipeline really build up.
Well, that's great to have the supply. The supply chain is there, and the demand will continue to grow. But to switch gears a little bit, so Jermica, back to, I'll talk a little bit more about social media. We're so, I'm on my iPad, you guys have your phones, I've got my watch, we're just so, there's so much of social media. But how does that make a business more vulnerable, would you say, to an attack? We're on social media as individuals, but how does that impact a business?
So I think when you, as I mentioned earlier, when you become complacent, when you become comfortable within your space of operating, that you're not always thinking about what someone may be looking to do negatively to your company or about your company, then that becomes a challenge because it's a vulnerability. When you utilize social media a lot of times as an advertisement to say, hey, look what we have, look what we're going to do, look where we're going to be, because it's necessary, because it is a new, customers are on social media, they're not watching traditional TV, not watching traditional news the way we used to, not seeing traditional commercials. So this is your way of staying current with the times to advertise, but it also makes you exposed, because if I'm thinking the wrong way, I am looking at what you have and finding out how can I exploit that. But more so, who can I exploit in that? It doesn't take much, because if I send something to 100 people and one person bites, that's all it takes to be successful. That was worth that small investment of that, just based on what you gave me, because it's there. And so those are the challenges. And so looking at, I would always recommend to coordinate with whether it's law enforcement, private security industries, academia, because academia, with some of our partnerships, we utilize them to help us know and understand what is cutting edge and what's coming out there, and try to use those trusted partners to tell them concerns that we have and what we can do and find a way to do that. So if you have trusted partners and you can collaborate, you can have honest conversations, you can be vulnerable, because it's better to be vulnerable with someone that you can trust than it is to be vulnerable to the person who's going to exploit who you are. And as long as you have social media and it's not going anywhere, those vulnerabilities and concerns are going to be there. So it's just, we have to just plan to protect and then validate that protection along the way, constantly, consistently.
And do you have advice on, aside from two-factor authentication and unique passwords? I've actually been a victim, in spite of those things, of a Facebook hack.
Yeah.
But is there anything else we need to be doing?
No, I was going to say that, to do the two-part authentication, to find ways that you don't just have something go singular straight out. Maybe another validation or verification where something must go through another entity or another review point or something for approval, especially your funding, your transfer of funds. It's just not from point to point. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is to potentially delay the things that you're doing for, especially if there's a funds transfer and so forth. Understand what technologies are. Go to the system website, which is www.cisa.gov, to understand potential vulnerabilities that have been identified through private industry as well as government investigations. Those things are going to be on there. And of course, if you identify something, we ask you to go to www.ic3, the letter I, the letter C, the number 3, the numeral 3, .gov to report something that you feel uncomfortable about or suspicious of. And those are the best things that we can do. Again, just remain vigilant to avoid the vulnerabilities.
Gotcha, thank you so much. Mike, so what advice would you give a company that's analyzing their current security situation?
Well, the first step is making sure you spend the time and the resources to train your users, because you can have every security measure in place, but a human can always bypass those. Even two-factor authentication, which every organization should have implemented for all of their line of business or significant applications. But if the users don't know that they shouldn't accept a call from somebody when they get that two-factor authentication text and give it away over the phone, then that two-factor is really no good. So the education is really key. Making sure the policies and procedures within the organization clearly identify and convey to the users what they should and shouldn't do with the information systems and what the ramifications are if they are not following their policies. A lot of times users just don't know that they shouldn't be doing something, even though they hear about all the breaches on the news every day. They still just don't know. And then taking a look at the information systems that you have in place in your environment, identify vulnerabilities, whether it's through a third party or an internal IT group, making sure that you are really catching what we call the low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities, that all these vulnerabilities are out in the public database that anybody can find, and the hackers, that's the first place they're going to go. So making sure those vulnerabilities are resolved. And then making sure the key aspect of training users is no password reuse, because most of the breaches that happen with a password compromise are because of a password being reused across multiple systems. So like social media, for example, if somebody uses the same password for Facebook that they do for 15 other cloud services, and one of those other cloud services gets breached, they're going to try that user ID and password on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on any organization that they can tie you to, and that's key. And we all do it. We all use the same password on multiple systems, but that's something that just has to be taken out of the equation.
My kids even use my passwords, so they should know that. Did you remember?
Yeah, so two things to that. So a question for you guys. How many of you guys have, in the last couple of weeks, received a notification on one of your bank websites that says, it gives you a warning about that we don't call you for two-part authentication, and we don't call you for that. Have you guys experienced that? And what do you do with it? You kind of ignore it, right? So those are indicators that you should automatically think about, well, if this can happen with my bank, perhaps with my business, and this is another thing that I should do a proactive approach to thinking about it. I ignore it too, right, all the time. And I, as I'm listening, I think about, do self-assessments. I'm more concerned about when someone logs into my Hulu account or my Netflix account, because those things matter to me. Because you will see it, and I'll go in and I'll clear, and it'll show me all these folks who I don't know, who somehow have got my Hulu account, and I go and I remove them. But what I'm not thinking about, and which I would say that we're not thinking about, is what else potentially has been impacted with those things. It's not just whether or not you use the same password, but just that I have all the other vulnerabilities than whether or not I can watch Queen of the South, right? So, and I think those things are key. And so we always miss. We're so focused on the big things, we miss the little things to really go in and take those warnings seriously, and then use that as an opportunity that, if nothing else has been hurt, let's prevent it from being damaging, even more damaging.
David.
I'd love to add to that, Mississippi State is, if you look at our total budget, we're $1 billion business. And so we, back a few years ago, of course, we invest heavily in IT and our services. But we stepped back, and frankly, because of some conversations with some of Jamaica's compatriots, we felt like we needed to have a third party come in and give us a really thorough penetration test. And it was an eye-opening experience for us. They gave us hundreds of pages of vulnerabilities that the institution had. Everything from a camera that was still using the default password that they could then use to watch keystrokes with somebody tapping, all the way to some serious vulnerabilities that they actually stopped us in the middle and said, we're not going to finish the report, you've got to fix this one today. And so I can tell you the value of the private sector in doing a quality job to be that third party look-see, because all of us have vulnerabilities, all of us have blind spots that we need to be paying attention to that we just don't even realize are there. And so there's a lot of companies that are out there doing that. There's some quality companies, and we've actually used Horn back several years ago to help us with that. I guess my encouragement would be do it, but choose somebody to do it well, as opposed to somebody that's just going to do a quick scan and then tell you that you're okay. It's incredibly important to have somebody else take a look at your organization and give you some advice on where you might have vulnerabilities.
Do you have a recommendation on who, like a small company who they would contact?
So I'm not going to do that. But we have worked with a number of the companies here in the state as well as nationally. And so certainly, if somebody has some questions offline, so we'll be willing to have further conversation.
This is great. It was a great thank you all so much. I wanted to get back to, we're kind of talking about the hacker. And I'm just curious, what you have learned about the mindset of a person who would do this kind of thing. I was listening to a podcast this week, and they talked about a 12-year-old child who learned how to hack into a game system just because they wanted to cheat the game. But what do these hackers look like? Are they teaching people? I mean, why do they do this?
There's always different motivations, but I would say smart people who are under challenge. because it takes smart innovation, wisdom or smarts and innovation to understand something and find a way to identify whether it's a vulnerability or not. And it's actually, unfortunately, it is professionalized now. There are professional, code writers that sell ransomware. So it's ransom as a service. And so there are people who do that, and you can go to a company per se and purchase whatever it is you're looking to do to use that to infiltrate Mississippi State. And this is what we're going to go and do it. I can buy it. I'm not the maker's not the end user, and those are people who know and understand those things. And just because if anything that's good, there's always an opposite for that. So you can always know that you're going to be matched by someone who's looking to undo what you've done. And there's no face to it. There's no name to it. There's no geographic location, or definitely no geographical boundaries to it in the cyber world. Because as long as there's connectivity, whether it's cloud, wires, modems and servers and so forth, then it's going to exist. And it is. We just have to work together to find a way to defend against it. Or I don't know if we can really prevent it. We just have to defend against it and then protect ourselves to make it more difficult, and then they'll move on.
Anyone else like to add anything? Or no, I've also. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of the characteristics of the individual, I'd just like to chime in. Back several years ago, a very specific example, we had somebody that was probably in that mode of boredom as a part of it, had incredible talent in this, and just for whatever reason decided that they were mischievous in nature. And so in that particular case, we were really fortunate because our Center for Cyber Innovation was doing some work on detection of threat, and through a whole series of events identified somebody that was planning on an attack of the heating and air conditioning system in one of the Dallas hospitals in the middle of summer to shut the system down for fun. And that person is in federal prison right now because of the intent behind that threat. So I think that the challenge that we face is that anybody with a lot of intelligence and not enough, either too much time on their hands or for whatever reason has a mischievous bent, can do some things that are far beyond even what they might realize. The threat there in that specific situation is you were looking at the potential for hundreds of people to die because of the heat wave that was going on in Dallas at that very moment in time. And so it's bad actors at the state level. We all hear about those kinds every day, but it's also that person with the laptop, in their bedroom in their mom's house that can do just as much damage as the bad actors at the state level.
Wow. It wouldn't be great if we could just get them in one of your programs in the state and use their intelligence for good rather than for bad. So I'd like to open this up to everybody. What do you see in the future? What can we expect? Like if we have the same conversation a year from now, are things going to look different? Do you anticipate what things might look like a year, 5 years from now? And on top of that, how can we stay on top as individuals, as business owners? How can we stay on top of these threats as they constantly change and progress?
Yeah, I think part of it we have to remain flexible, and that is not become comfortable with the fact that we resolved one issue or we've identified one issue and think that is the end of it, because so we evolve and our detection systems evolve and understanding of threats evolve, so does the offender evolves in what they do and how they execute their goals and objectives. The other part of it is that we've talked about several times is we have to collaborate and communicate. Report. It's very important to report the things that you've been exposed to. And I think that is key because as companies with shareholders and customers, we oftentimes don't want to tell someone that we've been exposed to something or we potentially have been attacked and that those things are out there. When we don't do that, then we potentially let that exposure have the ability to become exacerbated because of the ramifications become greater and greater and greater. And that's where, from an investigative standpoint, we can help to thwart that some and to help to manage that situation. One, prevent others from getting attacked, but also protect the spillage or the consequences of what has occurred to you. And the quicker we know, the higher the likelihood of us recovering whatever was lost, whether it's data that's being held, data that's been sold, money that's being transferred. The quicker we know, the higher the likelihood of us recovering those funds for you, so you don't really have any monetary loss. And then again, just communicating what you see to the community, so we can share that.
And I would just chime in. It's that never let your guard down. And unfortunately, I have a really real world example as of last night. We had a social security leak, if you would, within my family. And I can tell you, as of 9:30 last night, how to lock your credit accounts for all three credit reporting services. And so it's one of those that just one little slip can create a vulnerability that you've got to be cognizant of. I think especially from a business standpoint, as well as the personal side of it, just staying educated on what the latest is. I think taking advantage of every educational opportunity that's there. We created back in 2020, we created with our Small Business Center and our Cyber Center an education program for small businesses. And that's readily available to anyone here today to take advantage of. And whether it's using that or whether it's using penetration testing with the private sector service, it's one of those that you cannot ever assume that what I've done today is sufficient for tomorrow. And so it's always being diligent and listening and taking those reports from your credit card, taking the reports from your bank, and really thinking about what does that vulnerability mean and how do I need to translate that over into other areas of my financial and data services.
Okay, that's good advice. Mike, would you like to add any final remarks?
Yeah, I would say organizations just need to acknowledge that you will be breached. If you haven't already been or don't know that you've already been, you will be breached. So the key is making sure you have processes, procedures, response plans in place to mitigate the impact of when that breach occurs. Any organization that has a computer and a human using it is vulnerable. So making sure that incident response plans are up to date and maintained and tested are critical. So many times we go into an organization that's been breached, they go through their incident response plan, they don't even have half the systems anymore that are listed in that incident response plans, and they don't have the systems that they are using in there. So, that causes a lot of chaos in the midst of chaos of a data breach. So that's really the key, and making sure that as we implement new technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, that we don't lose sight that those are more technologies that are expanding our attack surface, and we need to focus on securing those technologies just like we do our email. And then, like I said before, training our users. Business email compromise, we get calls every single day about organizations that have lost money wiring out money to an inappropriate vendor that was through an business email compromise. So making sure that your cybersecurity program incorporates both those technical controls, but also the old-fashioned internal controls that you're not going to wire money without some sort of verification that the vendor who you think is the vendor trying to change their address or their bank account is actually that person. It's as simple as picking up the phone and calling them on a known good number and verifying that. So really, cybersecurity and cyber risk, we've just got to continue to mold it into our everyday life because it's a part of it.
Well, we are about out of time, and I just want to thank you gentlemen for sharing your time and your expertise and for shedding some light on this very serious threat, giving us some ideas on what we can do to protect our data in the future. Thank all of you for being here today. There's a plenary session that's beginning downstairs at 10:30, and let's give our panelists a round of applause.